Yeah, thank you. So please, as icebreaker before we get right into the conversation, in one word or short phrase, what are your expectations, for today? We're going ahead to highlight what we're trying to do today, what we're trying to achieve with gender mainstreaming. Please, in the chat box, we just want to hear from you. One word or short phrase, what are your expectations for today, even as you participate in this webinar? Like I said, please, let's participate maximally. Use the chat box to comment. I can see someone has, dropped a name. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this webinar. Please, everyone, feel free to engage as well. In one word or short phrase, what are your expectations for today? I mean, for me, it's really understanding a lot more about the concept of gender mainstreaming and how I can really apply that to my work. A lot of people say gender mainstreaming, and I'm like, how do I, in practical terms, how do I apply this to the work that I do? So I'm really looking forward to a speaker and even just the session in general to have a full grasp of understanding of what gender mainstreaming is. Please, let's use the chat box. So we're going to give about 1 minute, for us to share our expectations in the chat box. Welcome, Adiza and Zainab. Happy to have you here. In one word or short phrase, what are your expectations for today? To expand your knowledge on the topic. Thank you so much for sharing. Absolutely. Any other takes? I see a few people on the call. What are your expectations for today? Can you share with us? Just as we prepare to delve into the session. Yeah, I use the word delve. Anyway. Great to have everyone. Yes, thank you, thank you. Please keep the comments rolling. Keep the comments rolling, and let's keep the chat box lively even as we go into this discussion. So yes, our objectives for today really two things, to provide basic understanding of gender and sex, as well as equity and equality. And secondly, to improve everyone on this calls understanding of the concept of gender mainstreaming, especially in achieving gender equality and equity in our program design and implementation. And for us to achieve this objective, we have with us today Khadija Lawal, who is going to be facilitating this session and just going through some of the basic concepts or fundamental concepts of gender mainstreaming. Khadija Lawal is a social development professional with over 6 years of demonstrated experience coordinating, managing, and executing innovative international donor-funded projects, assessing the impact of programs, and also engaging with diverse stakeholders on programs that seek to empower and prevent girls and women from gender-based violence. Khadija is also a certified global trainer, a GBV instructor awarded by the Federation of, of International Gender and Human Rights, a trauma-informed practice expert, 2023 Advocacy Peach Award winner by Consortium for Street Children in the UK. She's also a certified human-centered design facilitator awarded by First Hand UK. Her work over the years has spanned across consultancy, economic empowerment, capacity building, increasing access to quality education, and inclusion of girls and women, prevention and response to GBV. So I'm going to hand over to Khadija now, to commence this webinar and take us through what we have in store. Thank you, Khadija, for agreeing to be with us today. I will take it away now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela, and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone, from wherever we are. Thank you for joining, and I would say we have quite a good number to start with. We have 29 participants, I have also been going through some of the expectations in the chat box, and I would say I love what I'm seeing because hopefully we will be able to get to your expectations before the end of the activity. So thank you once again. And yes, so we're going to start with a little poll. And before we start, I would say I would really appreciate it if we're able to just come into this with an open mind. I know that all of us have our own reservations or perception or perspectives when it comes to gender mainstreaming. So we would start with this little activity, and I would love us to make it very participatory, please. We have the chat box and we have my other colleagues also here. If you have any concerns or questions, please feel free to reach out to them. So what do you understand by the term gender mainstreaming? I know that this is not the first time we're coming across this. I know, we've been talking about gender. So what do we understand by gender mainstreaming? Please feel free to use the chat box. In 1 or 2 sentences, what comes to your mind or what do you understand by gender mainstreaming? Before we dive into the session, let's check our own understanding of gender mainstreaming. Please, can we take 1 minute to do that? Gender mainstreaming, what comes to your mind? What's your basic understanding of the term gender mainstreaming? The chat box is open, so please feel free. Hello? Let me know if you can hear me, please.
Yes, Khadija, we can hear you.
Okay. So please feel free. Okay. Deliberate inclusion of gender in all we do. Thank you. Let's just keep the chat box very active and feel free to just drop it. What comes to your mind? There are no wrong or right answers. We just want to see what comes to our mind, like when we hear gender mainstreaming, or what our understanding of gender mainstreaming is. Women and girls interventions. Thank you. Men and women have access to equal opportunities. It's also a nice one. So just keep dropping it in the chat box. So due to time constraints, we will try to keep this very short and simple. So some of the content we'll be taking you through today is introduction, which we will check our biases, and then we'll also look at the background of the webinar. We'll also look at gender roles and stereotypes, and then we will see how we can take the process forward. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, I know that all of us have our own biases. We also have our own perceptions or perspectives to everything, almost everything in the world. And what we're trying to do is just a very quick activity to check our biases. We have been engaged in activities or interventions in one way or the other. And what we're trying to do is to just check our biases. So on the screen, we have different colors written there. And what we're going to do is also to take 1 minute of our time to, okay, I think we can just unmute ourselves or maybe use the reaction to raise our hands. If you can just tell us, which color did you see? So we have the first color by the left. So let's just contribution from the participants. What colors can you see on the screen? Feel free to use the chat box or raise your hand to just say it out. Please, let's have active participation. Okay, there's a blue, okay, light blue, green, okay. What other colors can we see? Yellow, all right, blue, okay, blue, gray, black. All right, thank you. So can we move to the next slide? Okay, we have more colors here. So please feel free to drop the colors you can see. We have pink, red, Okay. What other colors? Yellow. Yellow. Black. Purple. Purple. Black. So thank you so much for your contributions, and feel free to keep dropping them in the chat box. So what we're trying to do is, please, can we go back to the previous slide? Yes, thank you. So as you can see, everyone have their own perception or point of view. For the first color we have here on the screen, it's written as green, but the color is blue. And the second one is written as black, and the color is purple. We have red, we have blue, we have white. So there are two things here. We have the color written, and then we have a different color, trying to indicate that color. And this is how various people see the world. And this is how, whenever we're talking about gender mainstreaming, for some, it's a green written in a blue. And for some, it's a blue written in a green. It means that everyone have their own biases. Everyone have their own point of views. Everyone have their own perceptions or perspectives when it comes to gender mainstreaming. So there are no wrong or right answers here, because it depends from where you are trying to make point that is a white and it's written in a yellow, and you see it as a yellow or you see it as a white. And what we're trying to do is we'll try as much as possible to respect everyone's view today. So thank you so much. Can we move to the next slide? Okay. I know we cannot talk about gender mainstreaming without coming across these two words. We have sex, we have gender, and these are words that have been used interchangeably over the period of years. And whoever is using the gender lens in their programming, definitely they are going to come across sex and gender. So what we're trying to do now is to check our understanding of the two terms. Do we have an understanding of what sex is and then what gender is in our own point of view or in our own layman understanding? So please, when you hear these terms, sex and gender, what comes to your mind? When you hear sex, what comes to your mind? When you hear gender, what comes to your mind? So feel free to use the chat box also. Thank you. I love that it's, wow, so many contributions. So feel free to use the chat box. What do you understand by sex, or what comes to your mind when you hear the term sex, and also gender? 1 minute for that. We can have one or two people raise their hands, and then we can just, you can unmute yourself and give us a very simple definition or a simple meaning, or what exactly comes to your mind when you hear the term sex and gender. Sex is binary, while gender is more diverse. Sex is the biological differences between a male and a female. Sex is biologically assigned, gender is socially assigned. So can we have one last contribution before we move to the next slide? Sex is biological, while gender is social. So thank you so much. Let's move to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you.
Hold on, before we move on, Khadija, we have someone's hand up. We'll just quickly unmute the person so the person can quickly.
Okay, all right. So please go to the previous slide so that we can listen to the person. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, give me a second. Oh, the person has dropped his hand.
Okay.
Okay, let's go on.
Okay, all right. Next slide. So thank you so much for your contributions. And as I've mentioned earlier, there are no wrong or right answers. And I love to say, or to give us that avenue for us to say it like to a layman, what really comes to our mind. Because I know this is not the first time we've been hearing of sex and gender, and sometimes we use them interchangeably. So sex in its simplest form is the biological differences between a male and a female, meaning that Some of these factors or attributes are physical. You see a man, you see a woman, you see a boy, you see a girl, and you automatically know that this is a boy, this is a girl, this is a male, this is a female. So these are biological differences. And when we're talking about gender, these are socially constructed roles and behaviors that a society associates with a male and a female. So let me explain this in a more broader way. So when we're talking about gender, it is socially ascribed by a community and it changes, meaning that a typical Hausa household or a Hausa community might have something that they refer or ascribe to gender differently from someone in the South. So depending on your ethnic group, depending on your environment, depending on where you are or your community, gender varies. And what we were trying to understand, gender in its simplest form is talking about any socially constructed rules and behaviors that are ascribed or are allocated or they are assigned to a particular sex because that sex is a male or a female. A very good example is in a typical northern part of the country, a female wears a wrapper or a skirt. So whenever you see someone with a wrapper or skirt, you know that it's a female. Or maybe in some parts of the world, when there's a newborn and you don't even know whether it's a boy or a girl, and when you get there to congratulate the family and you see the baby wrapped in a pink shawl or wearing pink suits, you know that it's a female. And when it's a blue or a brown or a white, sometimes you know that it's a male. So what we're trying to say is, in its simplest form, when we're talking about gender, these are socially ascribed rules and behaviors that are assigned by a society or a community to a particular sex. They are not biological differences. So if it's clear, we can move to the next slide. So you know that whenever we're talking about gender or sex or anything regarding gender mainstreaming, definitely we have some myths and facts. And what we're trying to do now also is a very quick activity for us to check ourselves. So I will keep telling us to check ourselves is because I am very sure our own perceptions in the beginning of this activity or in this webinar will change, or let's say a particular percentage is going to change at the end of this webinar. And we are trying to be very honest and open in these conversations. So that's why I say maybe based on your understanding or maybe from a layman's, point of view. So we're going to have a very quick activity, and I am going to call a statement and you will use the chat box. Sorry, the emoticons we have there. Thumbs up means you have agreed or it's a true to the statement. And thumbs down means it's a false. You have not agreed to this particular statement that I'm going to read. And after this activity, we will have one or two participants from the group to also maybe explain one or 2 points why they agree to this and why they do not agree to that. So we're starting now. So the first statement goes like this: sex and gender are determined by biology. Thumbs up for true, thumbs down for false. Let's use the reactions on the screen. So sex and gender are determined by biology. Let's get a thumbs up if you agree with this, and let's get a thumbs down if you do not agree with this. Okay, we're having a thumbs down. Feel free, please, to just react to the activity. A thumbs up for yes, and a thumbs down for no. So let's keep engaging. And the second statement says, gender norms can change over time. Gender norms can change over time. Thumbs up for true and thumbs down for false. Okay? GBV, gender-based violence, only includes physical abuse, hitting, punching, and pushing. If you agree to this, let's have a thumbs up. And if you don't, let's have a thumbs down, okay? Women allow themselves to be abused. They could leave their partners if they really wanted to. Do you agree to this? Or do you not? Do you disagree to this? Right? So a man cannot rape his wife and vice versa. Do you agree to this? So you can just indicate it as 4 thumbs up or 4 thumbs down, so that we know which of the statements you're agreeing and disagreeing to. So a man cannot rape his wife and vice versa. Okay? Women are better at nurturing and showing emotions than men. Do we agree that women are better at nurturing and showing emotions than men? So women lack skills to make effective leaders. True or false? Women lack skills to make effective leaders. So I'm also having a disclaimer here. There are no right or wrong answers. What we're trying to do is to just check our own perception on these myths that I have read. So please, can we have 2 people from the participants to tell us why they agreed to one of the statements or why they disagreed to one of the statements? So feel free to raise your hand, and we'll give you the permission, or we will unmute you to speak. So do we have anyone that wants to make their point on why they agree to one of the statements and why they disagree to any of the statements? 1 minute for that.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I've been unmuted. My name is Asika. So why I choose true and false to some of the statements is because sex cannot be changed. These are physical characteristics that it's original, like it's like this till we are dead. But gender is something that can be changed over time because it's a perception or it's a norm. Some people we can call it a gender norm that people believe that this is how it was, and most of us were born to come and see some of these things, and it was actually created or it was established by someone. So gender norms can be changed, but sex cannot be changed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And as I've mentioned earlier, there are no right or wrong answers. What we're trying to do is for us to have a self-introspection, for us to understand how do we view some of these gender issues, like from our own inner point of view. What do you feel? How do we feel? And then also at the end of the webinar, we will try to check and see, okay, did anything really change, or is it still a work in progress? So thank you so much for your contribution. Please, let's move to the next slide.
Yeah, before we move on, Khadija, we
Okay.
have 4 more. Then we have Paul. I think he's been unmuted.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Paul.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Hi, Paul, can you hear us? I mean, because we have limited time, let's have Kudo. Please, I hope I got your name correctly.
Hi, good afternoon. I wasn't sure if you were talking about me. Thank you very much. Yes, we talked about gender-based violence only includes physical abuse, and I said no. There are so many forms of violence that are not physical, and some are even equally as damaging. So you have verbal abuse, psychological abuse, socio-economic abuse, and they can all be equally as damaging for the victim as bad as physical abuse. Of course, I'm an HR person. You talked about women lack skills to make effective leaders. There's been so much research that shows to the contrary. Women have all it takes to be effective leaders, and all they need is to be given the right opportunities and the right environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I love that. So thank you. Do we have any other person, or we can move to the next slide?
We can go on now, Khadija. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Angela. So we have another very quick activity that says, what are your thoughts on equality and equity? I know that this is not the first time we're coming across equality and equity, and we have two pictures on the screen. The first picture depicts either equality or equity, and the second picture also depicts either equality or equity. So can we just get an quick activity in the chat box? Maybe you say picture 1, equality, picture 2, equity, or maybe picture 2, equity, picture 1, equality. So by mere looking at the pictures, which of the pictures depict equality and equity? So you can either say 2, equity, 1, equality. So feel free to do that, okay? 1, equity, 2, equality, okay? 1, equity, 2, equality, okay. Okay, so it's like we have the same reaction to all the pictures. Okay, equity, equality, okay. Equity, equality, equity, equality. Okay, all right. So thank you for your contributions. Next slide, please. So yes. So the first picture depicts equality and the second picture depicts equity. So let's just paint a very quick scenario. When you take a close look at the two pictures, one of the picture that says equality, we can see that there's a football pitch, and let's assume that it's a father, a mother, and a child trying to look at what's really happening there. And we have 3 boxes. And in the first box, all the participants, mean that the father, the mother, and the child were given the box, even though the father did not need the box. The mother might need the box, and then the child need more than one box. But what happened in that particular picture is there was equal distribution, because the assumption is that everyone benefits from the same supports, whether you need it, whether you don't need it, because it's available, everyone gets a share. And with equity, that's in the second picture, we can see that we have the 3 participants, which is the father, the mother, and the child. The father, who didn't need the box, didn't get the box because he can see what's really going on with or without the box. The mother got 1 box because to see clearly, she just need a little, one of the boxes so that she can see what's really going on. And for the baby, who is the child, he needs more than 1 box for him to properly see what's going on in the football pitch. So when we're talking about equity, it's not about just equally sharing or distributing, but the main focus on equity is what is the need? Who needs it the most? So just because we are designing an intervention and we feel like, okay, part of the deliverables or activities is distribution of palliatives or maybe distribution of some items, and we feel like everybody on that project must benefit. No. When we're talking about equity, it's all about assessing the needs and seeing that, for example, let's say we are having an intervention with boys and girls, and part of the deliverables is sharing a menstrual hygiene package or kit. We know that the boys do not need the sanitary pads, but what exactly do they need? So that when it comes to that line activity, we can say that we use our gender lens. And then when we're trying to talk about the budgeting, it's a gender responsive budgeting. What are the needs of each participant on that project? So it's not about saying that you're equally distributing because it's available, but it's all about everyone gets the supports they need based on their needs. So we try as much as possible to assess, to navigate, to have conversation, to do a lot of assessment and understand what are the peculiar needs of everybody on that project. So please let me know if this is clear so that we can move to the next slide. So let's move to the next slide. So we have some points here which we need to put at the back of our mind. So when we're talking about gender equality and when we're talking about gender equity, we need to understand that gender equity is the process. So meaning that as we are trying to design, it's not like cast on stone. So the more we are designing, the more we are understanding the needs, the more we are like so as you're executing your intervention, whatever it is, you're trying to like really, because the needs are always changing. So for example, when we design an intervention, in the first 3 months of that intervention, the need of your participants will be different when it's like say 6 or 10 or a year into that intervention. So it means that when you're trying to budget for your activity, you need to also use your gender lens, knowing that these needs are changing. And it means that at a particular juncture in your programming, the needs are changing, and then our budget is going to change. So it's a process. And then also, it's about fairness. Just because I always make reference to COVID-19. During COVID-19, when the palliatives were shared, there wasn't like really equity in the sharing. So it was more like just equality. There was an equal distribution. So we are entering this community and then we just share whatever it is that we have. So when we're talking about equity, it's all about fairness. It's all about trying to see what the needs are. And also, women and men have equal access to opportunities for realizing their full potential. And then when we're talking about equality, it's all about distribution and everybody gets it, and then just reporting it for the sake of reporting, in the sense that this is our line activity, we have shared it, everyone got it. But when you're like, even when you're reporting and you're taking a gender equity lens, your reporting is more interesting because there's a human angle. It's not about we have it as a line activity and we are sharing it because it is there. So thank you. As we are moving, like we are diving more into it, you can see the correlation from most of the slides. So let's move to the next slide, please. So apart from gender equality and gender equity, there's also gender inequality. And we need to understand that when we're talking about gender inequality, it begins even before birth. So I always say this, that we are all responsible in one way or the other. So because in some particular households or communities or environment or societies, there's a particular, belief that boys are superior than girls. And mothers are more excited when they are pregnant with boys than when they are with girls. And in some communities, it might be vice versa. So it starts from even before birth, even before a child is born. So you are so excited because it's a boy, or you are so excited because it's a girl. And then when you give birth to these children, you are treating them differently. So some are inferior while some are superior, and that's how they feel. And it's a contribution from the parents. And then another thing is gender inequalities become more pronounced as boys and girls grow into their adolescent years. So as you're raising a child, they might not really recognize or understand that, okay, this sex is treated as superiors and this sex is treated as inferior. But as they are growing older, they are becoming more aware and they are beginning to understand that, okay, I am treated differently in the community or at home or in school because I belong to a particular sex, or maybe because I do not have particular skills, or maybe because I have a disability. So it all starts from there. And this is how we start to have issues around confidence, self-esteem, and then also overall shaping the life of children or adolescents. Another thing is gender inequalities have huge impact on the quality of life for girls and boys right into their future. Just the same thing I have explained. Hello, sorry. So it's the same thing I just explained. When we treat a particular sex unequally because they belong to a particular sex, it plays a huge impact on the quality of their life. So some will start feeling that they do not have a full potential or they do not have any potential. So they begin to question their own choices. They begin to question themselves. And before you know it, someone who is vibrant, who is ambitious, they have started to like feel inferior, and they begin to say they do not have any meaning for their lives. And then we are all responsible as community members, as parents, as siblings, as members of the community in one way or the other. And then lastly, we have society shapes gender roles and expectations. Just from the definition of what gender is, we know that the society or community we belong to shapes gender roles and expectations from very early age. And I always make reference to this. So when your children are growing up, you are trying your very best as a father or as a mother or as an auntie or an uncle to try to shape the lives of your children or your nieces or nephews or students. But then the environment within which you live have their own cultural norms, social norms and values, and they shape the expectations or rules or beliefs or mentality of your children at an early age. So we need to understand that, and we need to know how we can strike a balance. So it's very important for us to understand how we can be responsible. So next slide, please. We're going to have an activity also, and feel free to use the chat box to indicate. So we have some professions here, and I know that whenever we hear some of these words, or let me say some of this profession, there's a particular sex that comes to our mind. So we're going to do a very quick activity. I'm going to call a profession, and then you can just drop M or F in the chat box. M means male comes to your mind whenever you hear that particular profession. And F means it's female that always comes to your mind. So forget about the evolving world now. So let's just be in our own era of, okay, let's say initially or previously or decades ago, what comes to our mind, what sex comes to our mind when we hear any of this profession. So I'm going with teacher. Feel free to drop M or F in the chat box. When you hear teacher, okay, F, okay, S. No, there's no S, it's F or M, yes, okay? Okay. So sorry, we're not supposed to have both. It's just one, we're picking one. It's either it's a female sex that comes to your mind or it's a male sex that comes to your mind. Oh, I love that, Hadiza, you've already indicated all. So yeah, nurse. When we hear nurse, is it an F or is it a F or M? Governor, male or female, okay? Doctor, hairdresser, nanny, architect, politician. So thank you. Can we move to the next slide? Just keep dropping your responses in the chat box. So thank you so much. I am very sure by now you will believe or agree with me when I say these rules have begin to shift. Even though the shift might be very slow in some of the world, some part of the country we live, and in some it's more fast based on the environment and then also the exposure level of people there. But traditional men's role from some of the professions we mentioned. So initially, politicians are only males, engineers, doctors, farmers, governor, electrician, architect, and manager. So when you hear this profession, it's just the male sex that comes to our mind. And when we hear hairdresser, secretary, nurse, receptionist, nanny, etc., it's the female sex that comes to our mind. I always give this example. I remembered when I learned that a male can be a nurse. So for the first time, so I was expecting a nurse and a male came in and I was like, where is the nurse? And he said, I am the nurse. I was like, no, I'm waiting for the nurse. I never thought that a male can also be a nurse. So, but as the world is evolving, we can see that this particular profession or gender roles have been are shifting. So we have representation of both males and females in each of these roles, which is really an achievement that we would love to see in the coming years. Only God knows the kind of achievements we're going to record. So thank you. I love that. So her hairdresser is now a man, which is exactly shifting rules. So please, next slide. So before we go to this gender stereotypes, do you agree with me that these rules are shifting? It might be a gradual process, but do you agree that gradually they are shifting, or do you feel like it's still stagnant? We still do not have representation of both sex. Okay. So there's also another important terminology that we need to understand when we're talking about gender. So these are all the fundamentals of gender, the foundation of gender before we dive into mainstreaming. So gender stereotypes, cultural and social norms. So you will believe me when I say that the society shapes the stereotype or shapes the mindset most of the time of people, in the sense that a society stereotype you because you belong to a particular sex, or you belong to a particular community, or a religion, or an ethnic group, etc. So for example, every girl or woman that is fair, she's expected, I don't know, there's this kind of stereotype that tall, fair women are lazy, or dark, maybe not really short, even average or tall, are more strong. So there are these stereotypes that do happen, and most of the time they affect the potential of people. So in a typical household in Nigeria, usually, I wouldn't say overall in all the households, but you can see that some activities are ascribed for girls. Drawing, having dolls, singing, reading, wearing a pink or purple. Professions like teacher, nurse, homemaker, caregiver are all ascribed for girls. This is what you're expected to do because you are a girl. And activities like trucks, Legos, math, running, sports, loving blue color, green, white, professions like doctor, firefighter, pilot, etc. are all ascribed for boys. So when these children are growing up, they already have a mindset that says, I am a girl, I'm supposed to act this way. I am a girl, I'm not supposed to dream so big. I am a girl in my community, I'm supposed to do these particular things. I am a boy, I'm not supposed to be vulnerable. I'm a boy, this is the way I'm supposed to think. So they are already stereotyped, and sometimes you find it very difficult, even though they have a lot of models or role models within the family and outside the family, but you sometimes find it very difficult for you to shape the thinking or mindset or future ambition of these children. So you can see how society plays a vital role in shaping our children and our thinking. So gender stereotyping usually varies from community to community, from family to family, from environment to environment. But this is for us to understand that this is how it starts. And how can we really interact differently from the rest of the community members? Next slide, please. So now we are diving deep into gender mainstreaming. And I would love us to take a close look at the slide we have here, because I know at this point, after all the fundamentals that I have taken us through, some of us will start thinking, why gender? Why? Why is everyone bothered about gender? Why do we have to do gender mainstreaming? Why is the world making noise on gender? Why? They don't really see the need or importance or why everyone is talking about gender. So we're trying to look at some of the whys now. And by looking at the screen, we can see that we have some write-ups here. So it says women account for more than 70% of those in extreme poverty. Hence, poverty is a gender issue. The question here is, why do women account for more than 70% in those in extreme poverty? Why women? So that's the question. And when we say why women, now we can have an understanding why gender in what we do, and then why it is a gender issue. It's a different case when it says maybe general men and women account, or maybe adolescents account, or maybe youths account. We know that it is not specified to a particular sex. And then also, 2/3 of the world's illiterate adults are women. Why women? What is the challenge? Why? And then we also have globally, women earn less than men. I am very happy that we have representation of human resource managers in the as some of the participants. So these are all the things that we need to put into consideration. So globally, women earn less than men for equivalent work. On average, women globally earn just 63% of what men earned. World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report. Why do we have a gender gap? Why do we still have women that are earning less, even though they are all working? Only 22.6% of all national parliamentarians were women, UN women. Why do we have underrepresentation of women? And then also, women perform more than 3/4 of unpaid care work globally, contributing to time poverty, International Labour Organization. So based on this information that we have here, we can have a glimpse or an understanding on why we are trying to do gender in what we do. I always say this, we're not trying to say that, okay, everyone is coming all out and this is what we're trying to do, or maybe like we're trying to contradict. But the thing is, if a woman wants to do this, what are the barriers? If she truly wants to come out of her comfort zone to explore something, what are the barriers? What is really holding her from doing that? And how can we support women to also also benefit from some of things? How can we try to see that we are having a gender responsive programming? How can we see that we are mainstreaming gender so that we are bringing or contributing or addressing some of these challenges? And this is why gender is important. And this is why we are doing gender in what we do. So let's move to the next slide, and I'm very sure it will make more sense. So when we're talking about gender mainstreaming, there's a particular model that is called the socio-ecological model, which have different spheres or different circles at different levels and bringing different people on board in what we do. If we say that most of these issues are gender issue, and that is why we are doing gender mainstreaming in what we do, then what is the socio-ecological model and why is it important? I will just try to paint a scenario for us before I dive into what this model is. So for example, let's say we have an intervention that is trying to address maternal death. So it means that we are having or recording a high number of women that are dying after giving birth. And we have identified a community that we are designing this intervention. In our normal interventions, how we traditionally execute or implement like years ago is just for us to say, women are dying and we need to do something. So we just say, why are women dying? And when we are designing this intervention, we are going to focus on only the women. So that's the traditional approach of project design. But with gender mainstreaming, we take this socio-ecological model, which means that we have to sit with the community, not only us as staff and we feel like this community is facing this challenge, and based on the secondary data that we have, we are designing an intervention. No. With socio-ecological model, you design your intervention with the community. It is their problem, it is their challenge, and they know it better than you. And what you're trying to do is you are not only targeting women who are the primary beneficiaries, who are the people that are really having that challenges. But the thing is, you look at these particular spheres or cycles of influence and see at individual level, if we are going to address this maternal challenge, we know that the women or the mothers are the ones suffering from this challenge. It means that they are our primary beneficiaries, and we need to interact with members or representatives of mothers to understand what the challenges are. And apart from that, when you look at the community, the context of the community, you know that in a conservative community, a woman do not decide that, okay, I am going to the hospital for antenatal or postnatal or prenatal, but you know that her husband is responsible. And this means that if you are trying to address this issue, it means that you have to design your project to involve the husbands because they play a vital role in this particular challenge. I don't know if you can see the connection. And you will also sit with representation of the fathers to understand what the issues are from their own point of view. Are you seeing how we are bringing more people on board because we are trying to address this issue? Apart from that, at interpersonal level, this is where the husbands come, because you know that it is not directly only on the primary beneficiaries, but who is like, you draw a network of influence and we put the mothers at the center because we know that they are the ones that are dying. The issue is the mother's issue. And then we draw another cycle. Who else is influencing this problem? Who else can we interact with to understand what or why these women are dying? And we know that it's the husband. And at interpersonal level, we know that we are going to interact with the husband. And we know that we must design an intervention that bring the husbands also into the picture. It is not going to be a one-sided thing. And apart from the husband, looking at the conservative community that we have, the next thing is the community. How is the community influencing or contributing to the death of these mothers? Someone might ask, how can the community? But when you look at the, number one, the family size, most of these husbands and wives are staying like it's an extended family. They stay with their mother-in-laws, their father-in-laws, the grandparents, and there's a lot of sociocultural norms that comes to this. If it is the belief of the grandparents that when you are pregnant, you are not expected to go to the hospital, definitely you need to understand that the mothers or the wives are going to suffer that because they live in the same compound with the grandparents. And it means that these grandparents are also influencing or contributing to this challenge. And then you also make an asterisk knowing that you have to interact with the grandparents. At community level, what are the sociocultural norms and values? How can you positively leverage on some of the things that this community hold dear to their hearts when you are trying to introduce your intervention? Because this is a social behavior change, and we know that it takes time, and we know that we cannot just step into a conservative community and say that we are CEDAR or we are UNICEF or we are Save the Children and we're trying to save mothers from dying. But the thing is, how do we co-create? How do we design? How do we become strategic in ensuring that we leverage on some of the existing cultures, traditions, platforms, communities in that community to introduce our own project that we are trying to address maternal health or death or whatever it is. And then at socio-political level, we look at policies within that community. We look at what exactly do they have before we even start looking at government. Within the communities, what are the little policies that they have? How can we ensure that from the design of our project, we push for a reform or something that we can bring the religious and traditional leaders also on board? And we want a situation whereby these people in this community that are influential are the ones anchoring this activity. We want them to be the drivers, and we as the organization to be the passengers. Let them understand that it is their issue. How do we design an intervention that we don't really have to go and start creating awareness, but during the design, we involve them for them to take ownership and for them to understand the consequences of this particular issue that we are trying to address. So I know it's a lot, and I know that when we are having the second series, we will dive more into this approach. But based on the little explanation that I have done, I believe or hope that we have started to see how we can mainstream gender beyond just saying that we are working with 70% females because we want gender representation. It's beyond representation. It's all about working with the community, not for the community, and involving every influential stakeholder, mapping them, engaging them for sustainability, for ownership, and then for you to achieve your end result. So thank you so much. And please feel free to ask your questions. And yeah, thank you for your contributions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Khadija, for taking us through this. It's really been an exciting one for me, just even listening to some of the basic concepts or biases that we have just as a result of either when we grew up or the things that happen around us. So I'm really excited for this session, and I hope everyone is as well. We have a few minutes to take questions. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. You can also raise your hand if you like to speak. We would unmute you here in the room.
We have Paul raising his hand.
Okay, I can see Paul. Yes, Paul, I think you have the floor now, right? Go ahead and speak or ask your question. You've been unmuted, Paul, so please go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Paul.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Paul, the Program Manager Service Delivery for PPFN. So this is a wonderful presentation from you, and I love the gender equality aspects. I'm sure most of us also love it. So my own comment there is I was looking at for some presentation possibly on the gender continuum. Gender unaware, gender sensitive to gender transformative. You get so because I think most of the things you are talking about in terms of our programming is all about being gender sensitive. So in as much as we are also trying to be gender sensitive, I think gender sensitive will lead us to gender transformative programming, so that we should know the aim we are of what we are, where we are headed, that we are heading to a gender transformative society, not only just a gender sensitive society, from being unaware to being a gender transformative society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I love that we are already talking about the continuum. So it's more like a process. So we are like moving towards, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, and then we are moving, let's say, around 4. So thank you so much for that and for bringing it up.
Yeah, maybe just also, Dr. Paul, thanks for bringing that up. This webinar is a two-part series. We thought that it was going to be really difficult to, put everything together in this webinar today. So we focused on really the concepts of gender mainstreaming, why it's really important in the work that we do. In the next series that's supposed to happen in the next 3 weeks, we're going to delve more into the continuum. We're going to look at gender response budgeting and also some practical toolkits to help us guide, the integration of gender into our program design and implementation. We hope to see you on that call, and we hope you're also going to bring as much people into that call as well. So thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from any other person? Please feel free to use the chat box as well. Earlier, we had a comment from Adiza about gender-based violence and just even how we don't talk about this enough. Would you like to expand a bit on that, Adiza? We have about 5 minutes left for questions before we wrap this up. Adiza, if you would like to expand a bit on that, please go ahead to use the reactions button and we'll unmute you here in the room. So I'll just try to pick up that comment now that Adiza dropped earlier. Maybe Khadija, you want to touch on that? Let me just try to.
Okay, all right, sure.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we have a question that says, how can we mainstream the non-binary, male and female?
Okay, thanks Khadija for pulling that up. I think we can go through that very shortly, but I just found Adiza's comment. And she said, thank you. I actually wanted to contribute about a burning issue that I believe has been significantly ignored. And times, GBV is not only applicable to women or female, gender is not limited to the domestic or household. We need to address GBV in the workplace, streets, and communities across our settings. Additionally, I've come across a lot of men who have been victims of abuse from their partners, from their female peers or partners or wives. But too often they don't get heard or any help due to our norms. So Khadija, do you have any reactions to this? Do you think, or do you know of any, maybe organizations or even platforms that could, give help to people that are going through gender-based violence, or even just some support group for men? Because we know typically men like to be silent about, some of these things. So if there's a support group or any advice you want to give to people in the room as to how to, address some of these things when they come across it.
Yeah. So I think regarding support group or any place that you can go and access their services, it depends on where you are. So if you are currently in Kano State, so we have Isawali Empowerment Initiative, who work with pro bono lawyers and community-based paralegals. We also have CARAV, I can recall, I think it's a coalition also. And we have a few other organizations. So maybe I can just share via email with you people some of the organizations that are working in supporting people that are traumatized or victims and survivors of gender-based violence. So when we're sending out maybe appreciation emails, we can just attach it there, or maybe we can have a slide attached to these slides with the recommendations. So apart from that, I feel like it's very important for people to have platforms, or I would say safe spaces. It goes a long way, because when you become aware of what gender-based violence is, it's like takes different shapes. It has different types, and most of the times we think that we are not victims. And when you become aware, you realize that you have traces of trauma, or maybe you are a survivor, or you're still a victim. And then most of the time, we ourselves are perpetrators in one way or the other. I keep saying that because when you understand what gender-based violence is and what types of or different ways we can also contribute to it, we understand that based on the environment, based on the upbringing, based on, you know, the nature of people or community we interact with, we are almost all guilty of being perpetrators. So I can drop the recommendations with you people, and you can add it as a slide or share it. And there are also platforms for learning this, like the Prevention Also Collaborative, that have a lot of short courses on gender-based violence. And there are also international organizations. You get certification. And there are also a few platforms on LinkedIn and Instagram that you can also join for support group. So I can just check some of them, compile them, and share with Angela. So if we're sending out the appreciation emails or maybe the presentation, we can just add it. Yes, SAC Center, exactly, across almost all the 36 states. So for Katsina and Kebbi, I am not sure, but I can also like do a little research and send it as recommendation. Yes, we have P1 also in Kano. We have FIDA in Kano. Yes, we do. So sorry, please. I think I lost most of the other question.
Right. Thanks, Khadija. I think the other question was one on how can we mainstream the non-binary, male and female gender in our setting? Maybe before you respond as well, you just also say that, you know, in the current setting that we are, just even in the laws, based on the context of the law, we really do not, the law does not, you know, recognize those that, you know, identify as non-binary. We really just have male and female in our setting. And when I say our setting, here in Nigeria, that cuts across all of our settings. So we try to shy away, you know, from having those discussions, because for one, it's not, you know, acceptable in the laws of, you know, where we implement and how and where we work. Also for the social norms and agency learning collaborative, we're really focused, especially in this our context, we're focused on women and girls. Although yes, we have interventions for men and boys, but our primary focus is for women and girls, just based off of the data of which Khadija had also shared some earlier. So yeah, I hope that anyway sort of give some clarity to how we try to, you know, frame gender here in this setting. The focus will be on women and girls. The other question that I saw in the chat box was, what does the data say on whether or not women are able to express their emotions better than men? I mean, there are a number of surveys out there, I would say, but a review of I think a study that I've come across about, this was conducted by some linguistic researcher, Deborah James, and some social psychologists on how women and men also sort of react. And that data sort of shows that at least out of the 56 people, we had 34, you know, women who were found to express their feelings more than men. And in this case, that's pretty much more than men. I'm sure that there's some other data out there that would pretty much show. And just even from what we know from our implementation, the women are more involved, you know, so they have a lot more context, they are able to share a lot more about some of the challenges that they are facing, as opposed to the men in our setting who we know are typically like, you know, the norm is they are the breadwinner, they are, you know, every day struggling or going about, you know, to put food on the table for their families, and they really do not have time, a lot of time to engage. So you have more women coming to you and sharing some of the issues that you see. Even when you go out for community outreaches and stuff, you still tend to meet a lot more of the women. And which is why we're saying, as we begin to mainstream gender in our work, we need to be able to implement interventions or solutions that would also sort of bring the men on board to help address some of these issues that they're able to influence. And some of those things we'll talk about in the next session. So when we're talking about internet access and just trying to have a gender transformative projects. Khadija, if you want to add any other thing to that, just before we close, because we have about 2 more minutes left on this session.
No, I think, Angela, you have already done justice to that. And just like what you mentioned, we will continue to take the process forward. And if you have any other areas that you feel you would want us to touch, because just like we've mentioned, gender mainstreaming is a very, very broad topic. And it will take us like quite a long time for us. And there's the need for us to also continue to research on it. So I think you've done justice to that. So I'm already looking forward to the next session. And please, if you have any questions, you can just feel free to, yes, you already have the emails, so you can feel free to send it. Yes, so I think that's it from my end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khadija. Thank you so much, Khadija, for joining the session today. This has really been an exciting one for me. I can also see comments in the chat box where people are really finding this exciting and useful. Just to reiterate that this is the part 1 of part 2. Part 2 will be coming up in the next 3 weeks. So please, if you're interested in this, send us a message. If you want us to touch on things aside from what I talked about, gender integration continuum, gender responsive budgets, and practical toolkits, let us know, and we'll see how we can weave that into the conversation. Thank you very much. If you're not a member of the collaborative, we're going to be putting a form right now on the chat box. If you'd like to join, please go ahead and fill the form. If you're already a member of the collaborative and you know anyone that is doing work in social norms and agency that would, this will be beneficial to them, please go ahead and share with them so they can fill the form as well. Again, the social norms and agency learning collaborative is a global community of practice that really focuses on research and knowledge dissemination of social norms and agency. We target people in government. We also work with a lot of researchers, donors, implementing agencies, and community-based organizations, and even individuals who like to do work or have some passion about social norms and agencies. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I also love the fact that it was participatory. This is a webinar virtual session, and I'm so excited to see all of the comments and reactions from us in the chat box. Really looking forward to the next session, and I hope you make it a date with us. Thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of the day. We're going to send out the materials to all of the emails that we have. If you would like us to share this material with you, please send us an email at infolearningcollaborative.com or chat us up on our LinkedIn or Twitter handles or Facebook handles, as you can see on the screen. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, and bye.
Yes, bye, Khadija. Thank you so much.